Hello and welcome to this video series featuring select single-player Far Cry Arcade maps that I built and published between 2020 and 2022. This was an excellent creative outlet for me during the COVID pandemic, and I wanted to showcase some of my proudest achievements here, and also walk through some of the creative processes that I used. Hope you enjoy. Spelunking Parts 1 and 2 were both published on May the 14th, 2022. This was my final map-making project, my biggest and most ambitious one yet. I wanted to finish on the biggest possible scale that I could. I feel like I did a pretty good job. Some of the reactions that I got from publishing these maps were mixed. This Part 1 was very well received and got a lot of praise. Part 2, the very last one that I ever did, is actually my lowest rated map, which was a bit disheartening, but I'm still quite proud of it. It features the biggest and most intense ending that I was able to achieve in any of the maps that I've ever done, and I'm really proud of that. I'm sorry that more people didn't get to experience it, but right now I'm just going to showcase Spelunking Part 1. First things first, I wanted to make this map feel as authentic as possible, like you're actually in a cave. And in order to accomplish that, I decided right from the beginning that I was not going to use the terrain tool at all, as much as I could manage. All of the environments are rock pieces, individual rocks and cliffs, and all of those things that I hand-placed one by one over the course of 5.5 months. I started working on this project on January 1st of that year and published in mid-May. For the title screens of both of the Spelunking maps, parts 1 and 2, I wanted them to have sort of opposite color schemes but similar structures, and I wanted them both to showcase the environment and also the lighting as it progresses through each of the two stages. That's very intentional. You'll see how the lighting in part 1 progresses from torches and natural light near the top, then you get into some darker areas where it's lit by these glowing mushrooms, and then the deeper you go, you encounter these luminescent crystals. Part 1 is full of water and has a cooler kind of feel to it, that's why it's got that blue text. Part 2 is a red theme and has fire and magma and all that hot stuff to it. Before we move on, I want to point out something. Look at those budgets up at the top right there. For both the objects budget and the lights and visual effects budget, those are right at the very, very, very edge. If I were to put one more of either of those in there, it would put it at 100%, and I consciously didn't want to do that, just for fear of potential technical issues that might arise. I don't want to catch people's PS4s on fire. But I managed to do that, and also keep the memory budget. I mean, that's the next most heavily used one, and it's only at about 2/3. I kind of view that as a personal victory, something that I like to celebrate. Structurally, there are some very important patterns that I wanted to maintain when designing this map. One of them being continuity for the believability of the map. Also the feel of it. I already mentioned how I used only rock textures and minimally utilized this landscape tool, really only just for this beginning, and there's one part with a waterfall that I had to use it, but otherwise it's all just rocks, it's all just objects. I wanted there to be, for each new section that you go into, I want the player to walk into the room and then be hit with a vision of awe, something that kind of strikes them as like, oh hey, that's really cool. I want a continual sense of going deeper and deeper and deeper as you progress through the map, so you really do. You almost go from the highest point possible to the very lowest point possible at the end. The lighting is something that I mentioned before that shows the progression of it, and it also gets darker as the map goes down. So by the time that you get way down to here into like almost the last parts, it's really, really, really dark, and you only have these glowing crystal structures to show the way. But then, at the very, very end, here we're getting to it, this final structure right here is one of my proudest achievements ever. This room is like being inside of a huge thunder egg. You got all these crystals, and you can see how big they are compared to a human AI. This is where the final battle takes place. I think it's pretty stinking awesome. The player starts up here on the surface, and you have to dive down into the water to get to the cave. This is really the only direction that the map allows you to go. The lighting's different when you play it. It's actually morning time, but I had it set for this more nighttime of day for the title scene. So you dive into this water, you crawl through some, or swim through some tunnels. There is infinite underwater breathing, so don't worry about that. And you encounter some bones, some skeleton pieces, and you think, wait a minute, something's not quite right here. By the time you get up to the surface, uh-oh, there's something kind of shady and not so good happening here. I used some clever scripting to make a scene play out here, and you get introduced into this hidden little cave structure that has a dark side, both literally and figuratively. As you progress, here's the first main chamber. This one has a nice light blue kind of color theme to it, and this is all based on real-life caves that really exist in the world. I designed them to have a similar aesthetic. Once you go through this chamber, which is lightly guarded, you have to crunch down and go through a little claustrophobic kind of area, swim through this short little tunnel, and then this is kind of a cool part right here. You're at the top of this rushing waterfall, and it picks you up under your feet. You slide across it, you cannot help it, and fall down into this poor sap down here. The bad guy gets taken out automatically, there's a cinematic moment, and you can move on. I want to point out something really quick. This water level right here is important. I'll show you why in just a bit. Make your way through the caves, do some more battling, encounter some more bad guys. There is a hidden room at this point. If you want to grapple up to that and come up here, you can get some extra weapons, get an early introduction to these glowing crystals. Watch out for snakes! And then if you take this path, you can be up on this little ledge, have a sniping opportunity to take out these two guys down here, and zip line underneath this waterfall. That waterfall, so remember how I mentioned the water level just a minute ago? This waterfall is at that same water level. That's part of the continuity of this. I wanted this to feel like it could be a natural structure all the way through. The regular path has you coming through this way and attacking these bad guys from this angle. Then when you get down to here, it starts to get really dark. The one piece of negative criticism that I got from this map that was most prominent was how dark it was. And I did that on purpose, because it's a cave, it's supposed to be dark. I wanted it to feel like a natural thing. But I decided to add something a little bit extra to this. So in this part, you just got these glowing mushrooms. They're there, they mark the way, but they don't really show you too much. But then there's also these crystal structures that pulse with light. If the player destroys these, which is really easy to do, they're actually just icicles from the assets. If you destroy one of these, then it spawns these faintly glowing blue lights that illuminate the entire area. And that's the key to doing it. Destroy the crystals, light up the room. By the time the player gets down to the deepest depths of this cave, you get to see the glowing crystals, and these are really, really cool. I combined a whole bunch of different assets to custom make each and every one of these, and also some different lighting sources to give them that kind of sparkly glow to them. The colors are very specific, the lights are very specific. I put a bunch of pieces of like shattered glass around them to give it that extra kind of sparkly glow. And every single one of these that you encounter throughout the entire map has a different structure to it. They're all unique, every single one. None of them is exactly like the other. They're like snowflakes. I did that to them on purpose in order to keep it a sort of a natural feel. When you get to this part right here, this is one of the big chambers. This is the biggest chamber in the entire map. You're on a fixed path, and it branches between these two kind of ways you can go that pretzel around each other a little bit. But this room is almost all the way dark except for these glowing crystals. But I also built in actual structures that most players probably won't ever see. I just wanted it to be there in case somebody, launched a grenade up there or something like that that would illuminate that part of it. I still wanted it to have that kind of realistic naturalness to it. The enemies get more and more intense. There's some really, really cool moments down here. And then, in preparation for the final room, I give the players 2 copies of each of the available weapons in the game, some of my favorites, and all the ammo and throwables that they could possibly want, as well as health and armor, all the good stuff. I wanted to make it not just functionally co-op friendly, but, aesthetically too. I wanted to have, there's a right and a left, they're both the same. Both players get their pick of the armory. For the final confrontation of the map, you slide down this rocky surface here, and remember how I said player enters a chamber and gets a sense of awe? That's exactly what I was going for here as well. I want the player to enter this room and their jaw to just drop to the floor. Hopefully I achieved that with some of you. Again, each one of these super big crystals is unique. Each one is different than the others. There is a hidden weapon in this game. I do like to include some hidden treasure goodies here. If you can get to it, there's an infinite ammo, powerful little pistol. At the bottom here, you fight some of the toughest enemies in the map, including some hints of human structures, which is suggestive of the second map. There's a lot more artificial structures and artificial light in Part 2. But after you defeat all these enemies, you go into this mining tunnel, which is totally dark except for that flare. Go along here, and you can't see it because it's totally dark, but the player will fall down this little hole, some crumbling rock sound effects play, and then you are at the end point, where you're shown a little message that this is to be continued in Part 2. Go deeper still. Just a quick note about the loadouts for this map, and this is true for Spelunking Part 2 as well. I thought it would be fun to make the loadouts modeled after actual animals that are known to dwell in caves, and I gave the scientific names for them to the loadouts. So this top one, that's a cave bat, that's a cave spider, and then that's a cave bear. And then Part 2 has its own unique set of free loadouts that are named after animals. That is Spelunking Part 1, my biggest, most ambitious, and most time-consuming project ever. Part 1 took 3.5 months to make, and Part 2 took an additional month or so after that because it was built on top of the structure of Part 1. So there it is. I hope that you enjoy it if you play it, and let's take a look at what the gameplay is like, shall we?
テーション